Welcome to the Soul Awakened Leadership Podcast. Soul Awakened leaders are courageous innovators and pioneers who embody a deep knowing of our interconnectedness and operate from a mindset of co-creation in service to all of life. They surrender their existence completely to a higher organizing principle that is leading them beyond separation and competition and opens up the potential for an entirely new way of being on this planet in a time of metamorphosis. In this podcast, I share cutting-edge perspectives and invite the voices of leaders who don't create followers but inspire others to step into their true power and essence. And in this episode, I'm in conversation with John Eden Kahn. John is a Berlin-based leader, mentor, facilitator, and the initiator of the transnational political party Singularity, working towards global governance sourced in the inherent unity of all life. One of the big topics in this conversation is our relationship to power, and how we can surrender our personal will to access the sacred principle of life. We explore how we need both a bottom-up movement of awakening leaders, but equally top-down structures that support this emergence and that call us to step up and translate our spiritual insights into practical approaches for system change. There's a lot more that we covered, so I won't stretch your patience any longer and invite you to jump right into the episode. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome, John. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And we've known each other for many years, even though we haven't been deeply in contact for all the time. But I've always been inspired by your leadership path and the contrast and the spectrum of the lives that you have lived. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you is that I feel you so deeply as an ally, and something that you oftentimes find words for that deeply touched me, and that land in a way that my mind still sometimes has difficulties to understand. And I can just feel how you've dedicated your life to the awakening of humanity and to extend your efforts also beyond the meditation cushion to really bring that practice into the world. But besides this very poetic capacity that I appreciate in you, I also appreciate your grounded rootedness in the material world and the marketplace. And so one of the fields that you're active in with Singularity is politics, and how we can anchor our political sphere in a deep recognition of the oneness of all beings, and thereby dedicated to service and to life. And so if I look at politics today, the contrast of what I perceive to be the motivating factor for many politicians couldn't be greater than what you're attempting to bring there. And at the same time recognizing, that when there's great tension, there's a lot of energy and potential to be released. And I'm excited to dive deeper and to explore this with you. And I'm sure there are many other things that will come up for us during this conversation. But before we go into these topics, I'd love to hear a bit and bring you in as the human being, John, that you are. And you're not just an inspiring leader and mentor, but also a father, a lover, a friend, and probably many other roles. And I'm curious, what is it that has shaped you? What were important turning points in your life? And what initiated you into who you are today, if you want to introduce yourself a bit with this frame.
Now, I'm really touched by your seeing of me and the way that you open our conversation with each other, and the invitation for a sharing of what has initiated me. I'm really touched by that question. And before I jump into that, I want to extend my gratitude to you for the invitation for us to have this conversation. And you're also someone who, ever since I came to Berlin, I think I came to Berlin in 2015, and you were someone who quite quickly was on my map. I was kind of, who's this guy? He seems to be doing stuff that feels really resonant. I felt an immediate sense of connection to you, and that I always had a sense that there would likely be some kind of increasing alignment of between us and what we're offering in the world. And so
Mm,
um yeah, I felt you someone who's in service along a similar or just really aligned stream to what I am seeking to be in service to. So yeah, I'm
mm,
happy to be with you and explore any of these topics. Yeah.
same. Yeah, I think even back then I had the sense of like, oh, I know this guy from the future.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was my sense too.
Mm,
Yeah, what has initiated me? I think probably my first teacher, like all of us, has been suffering.
mm,
And I think what has been the primary initiating force in my life has been the tension between coming into life as a pretty sensitive soul who feels the whole and who I think I was a unusual child as far as my parents were concerned. Maybe not unusual as far as the wave of awakening souls that are coming in is concerned, but
mm,
um, I was always clear as a child that it felt like an insane invitation to me to, what's my job going to be? What's the cog in the economic machine that I'm going to, fill like, and the much more sane thing from my perspective was, okay, no, wait, I need to stop and I need to feel and I need to sense what is this place? What
mm,
is this life that I've arrived in? What is my part to play? And then I will play my part, And so I came in as a very sensitive feeling being who was, yeah, I think increasingly traumatized and devastated by what I found myself to be surrounded by and in contact with. And that sent me on a deep journey of, do I want to be here? Do I really
mm,
want to be in this world? And
mm,
that journey peaked in my late teenage years and my early 20s, where I was a homeless heroin addict for 5 years, where I was really in the dark night of the soul consideration. Do I want to be here? And I was more than 51% no. I
mm,
was in a deliberate self-destruction process. And there was a particular point during that journey where it was as if the kind of fish hook of my soul came and got me and just made clear to me, told me I was at a choice point and at a crossroads.
mm,
And I could either continue the life that I was in that would likely lead to prison or death or some combination of both. And that those were realities I had been surrounded by. Or I could reorient to what some deeper part of me knew I'm here for.
mm,
And I knew what that meant. I knew that I've come here, that my purpose in this life is to be part of the shift that needs to happen on this planet so that we together live in a world that is more aligned with the truth of our hearts and the truth of our souls and the truth of our bodies. Um, yeah, so the tension of that, the vulnerability of that, the clarity of that, the drive, and I've always been a deeply purposeful being as well.
mm,
I think in the earlier times of my life, I've always felt I have a huge amount of energy that I feel like I'm connected to in that. And in earlier forms of my life, I just had no idea what to do with it. And so it was directed in, it was the same energy that drove me in intense drug addiction and pleasure seeking as the energy that drives me now, in my service is the same energy. It's just, it's coming through
mm,
I like to think a cleaner vehicle, now in a more mature vehicle, though I'm still very much on my way.
mm,
Um, yeah, so I think the initiating force of my development was the the crucifixion that I feel so many of us are in between the world that our hearts and our souls already know and the world that I found myself in,
mm,
and the heartbreak of that, and the question can I participate in that change?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you know this journey.
Mhm. Yeah, I can relate in many ways. And I've just been listening again to Francis Weller and his definition of initiation. And three of the aspects that he mentioned is that there's a severance from the world that we used to be, that there's a loss of identity, and that it's not possible to go back to
Yeah.
the life that we've been living. And I feel
Mm.
that you've experienced probably many of these initiations, but a very deep one at that point in your life, in
Mm.
your early adulthood. And I'm curious to hear how your life unfolded from there and how you directed this energy into the work that you're doing today. And yeah,
Mm.
maybe also share a bit more about what it is that you're currently channeling into this world.
For sure. Yeah, I really like the definition of initiation that you just shared, and it had me remember. I think I've had a number of points in my life where there has been some severance from
Mm,
how things were, and in that severance, I know that there's generally been a phase where some part of me has hoped that things may go back to normal in
mm,
some way. And
mhm,
then I think over time have become more and more accepting that often things never go back to normal again in the same way that that time has gone. And
mm,
this is the new normal, for want of a better word, you know.
yeah.
And I think actually those of us who've been through the blood and the guts and the beauty of those phases of the journey are actually in a humbly important position when it comes to bearing witness to what's happening collectively today. Because
Mm,
I think, you know, that's part of the horror in a certain way that so many people have experienced since the rise of the pandemic and the various other aspects of this interconnected web of global crises that are just kind of building and building, and is the world that was normal for so many of us is gone, you know.
mhm,
And that's really scary for a lot of people. And I think for those of us who've been through experiences like that, where even though it's been painful and it's been scary, there's been a deep thread of wisdom and intelligence that's revealed itself in the midst of the challenge of the process, then you know
mhm, mhm,
that's that's helpful. That's helpful info
mhm, mhm.
on what's happening collectively.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, yeah, after my soul, as I say, came and got me, I was ready for that choice to exit that world. Then I previously had not been ready for that choice. Um, I tried to get clean a few times and I just wasn't really ripe for it. I wasn't ready for it. And I generally perceive that someone cannot exit levels of addiction that are that intense on the body unless they come to a point where they are 100% clear that there is no other way than to fully exit that world.
Mm,
So I got clean by myself alone in a room over a course of about 6 months. And yeah, and I did it with a large amount of methadone next to my bed in my bedside drawer as I went through that process, because I knew that if I could go through what my body went through in that without reaching for it, um, this would never hold me again. And
mm.
and that's what I did. So yeah, and then I thought everything would just be like, oh, I'm done now, and uh, and it was actually a far more vulnerable process. Of course, you know, I then learned how to be a human being again, and it not even again, because actually my childhood was pretty, you know, my whole path growing up was a bit all over the place and rugged, and you know, yeah, and so I was learning to be a human for the first time in a certain way,
Mm,
and I went and got back into education. I did an access to university course that was me and other interesting people who had interesting stories for why they hadn't stayed in education, like a bunch of them being mothers who had kids early on and who just were like really wild, fascinating, interesting beings. And that was fun. And then, yeah, I went to university, and it was in the process of going to university that I started to realize my capacity. I started to realize that even though I had come from what felt like, at least in terms of the previous years, the bottom, I realized I had a level of capacity to reach what was conventionally in that world the top. And I was going to do a PhD at Oxford with Oxford University, between Oxford University and Bangor University, taking meditation into prisons. I'd done a degree in psychology with a particular focus on neuroscience. And that was the first point where I went to my first retreat with the man who's been one of my principal teachers in the entire time since, whatever, the over 15 years now since, Bruce Lyon. And yeah, it just blew me completely open. And I had been in committed spiritual practice ever since I got clean. Even before getting clean, that really started, my soul came and got me. And there was a demand for a daily way of being where I was opening my heart and opening my being to, who am I? What am I here for? What is the truth of this heart? What is the truth of this presence here? What am I connected to, and what do I want to be connected to? And yeah, and that led me to Bruce eventually. And there was a point where we spent some time in the Egyptian desert, which has become one of the most sacred places for me in the world. And particularly because of this first experience that I had there, where it was like there was a kind of lightning strike through my being that I experienced out there, and a transmission, like a voice that basically said to me, okay, this whole PhD thing, that's coming from a deep place in you, but it's also coming from a place that has some fear in it and some projection that if you do this, then you're going to have some kind of employment security. You know that this is something that you're thinking of doing before you do what you're really here to do. How about just do what you're really here to do? And it moved through me so strongly. And also what happened for me is, maybe people watching this or hearing this can relate to, is that was really my first retreat experience in a deeply dedicated, heart-centered soul culture. And it was transformational for me to just be in a field of beings who were relating with each other from that place. And it shook me so strongly that I basically I had this internal crisis that was happening for me on the way back to my home to go and begin the pre-PhD masters and then into the whole academic treadmill and so on. And my crisis was, how on earth, what am I going to do? How can I go back into that field and stay connected to what I've experienced here? And either it felt like, if I go back into that, I'm going to lose this, or if I go back into that and I stay connected to this, it's not going to work, because I was in a tight academic environment that, would not be super tolerant to the place that I was finding myself wanting, starting to live from. Actually, I just thought to myself, okay, I'm just going to go back there. I'm going to hold this vibration. Whatever happens, whatever happens. And I did. And I got back home, and literally within 5 minutes, I knew, I'm not doing this. Anyway, so what I did from there is I ended up basically spending the next 7 years working for projects that were dedicated to social transformation on the basis of spiritual awakening. I had some good opportunities that came to me that were just aligned gifts from life, that, where, oh, wait, this door's opening. Interesting. Okay, this door's opening. Interesting. So I did that for the next 7 years. I was also simultaneously still journeying with Bruce and with the community that we're both connected to there. And he then, I think it was in 2011, 2012, that he passed me the headship of the community that he had founded, Shambhala School, which was an international spiritual community dedicated to spiritual awakening, essentially. And yeah, so that began a major thread of a leadership journey for me, to actually lead a community. I learned a lot of lessons. I'm still learning those lessons. I'm still head of that community, although I have evolved it into a new form, which is called Avatara now. So one of the things I do is Avatara, and Avatara is essentially dedicated to, yeah, the mystery of what it means to be an awakening human and an awakening humanity in this extraordinary time of collective initiation. So that's one thing I do. Working with leaders, leadership, power is a major thread of my journey. So I also do mentorship work with what I call soul driven leaders. So people who are seeking to lead from and initiate, pioneer projects, businesses, organizations, trainings that are an expression of the love and the creativity and the purpose that want to come through them.
Mm.
And as you mentioned, I have, definitely the most adventurous dimension of my purpose journey so far, as I've initiated the beginnings of a transnational political party called Singularity, which is dedicated to a radically different kind of politics and approach
Mm.
to politics and leadership and power that starts with the inherent unity of all life as the foundation for how we address the major issues of our time. So,
Mm.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of what I'm up to.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah, I knew some parts of this journey already, but it's very beautiful to get a larger picture. And what I find so interesting is that in the way that you're describing your own initiation and your own maturation, I can sense that in some ways you've been walking a path that we're as a collective, as humanity, are just slowly embarking on. But I feel that you have already taken these steps, and I sense that we as humanity are invited to follow people like you into this maturation where, I've often heard this metaphor, of humanity being children just playing around and wasting resources, but there comes a time of maturation where we actually ask ourselves deeply why we are here on this planet and really turning our perspective from distraction more to stewardship and really acknowledging that, yeah, we're here for a reason. And I feel that you are embodying this reason very beautifully, and through that inspiring others to come into this process of maturation that we as a collective still have ahead of us. So thank you for sharing this personal path as also a fractal representation of a bigger pattern that I see emerging.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I hope that humanity might be a little bit less stubborn than I was. I notice, and that's a real source of compassion for me in a certain way.
Mm, mhm,
If I think
mhm,
about myself, I've been a deeply dedicated path walker for pretty much my whole life. And
mhm,
still, if I look
mhm,
back on myself, oh my God, I've been so stubborn and I have been so unwilling at times to really release certain things that life then was like, okay,
mm,
this is gonna really hurt if you're not willing to let go here, and
mm,
it did really, really, really hurt. And at a certain level of pain, I was like, okay, now I'm willing to put everything up for negotiation.
mm,
And I see that in the collective process. My personal my personal deep sense is that we are going to make it to the other side of this crisis, and that there is a next phase of human evolution that is going to emerge from the bottleneck of the
mm,
current times. And I think we are in a choice point around how much suffering leads us there. And
mm,
I hope that, there's humanity will be less stubborn than I have been,
mm,
and that, yeah, there's the minimum suffering, which is also, just if we look at the news, if we just are soberly honest about what we're surrounded by, is also an extraordinary level of suffering that our
mm.
world is, so um yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And at the same time, I wish us as humanity the level of humor and self-irony that you're bringing to this process, which I think is also a beautiful resource. Mm.
Gotta laugh, Jonathan.
Yeah. I remember some time ago you shared a video where you invited people and you shared a calling into true power. And I remember I was very fascinated by that video and by how you were bringing this transmission.
Mm.
And yeah, you were very directly speaking to this force that is awakening on this planet right now, that is very different than everything that we've experienced so far and all ways of power that we have so far
Mm.
utilized.
Mm.
And I heard you mention the word power a few times before, so I'm curious to dive a little deeper there. What is true power to you?
Sure. Yeah, this has been a major focus of exploration in my journey. The way I describe my sense of power is that power is one frequency of source. So, if I say, isn't love clearly a frequency of source reality? A lot of people would be easily like, oh, yeah, of course
Mm,
that's, and we could also say, isn't the intelligence that scientists and cosmologists are increasingly recognizing swims and lives through life and matter and the cosmos, that feels like a frequency of source reality too, right? And be like,
mm,
yeah. Power is a little bit harder sometimes for people to stomach because we are so used to abuses of power, and we're
mm,
so used to the deep trauma that we have collectively around power.
mhm,
But my experience is that power is a frequency of source. And just like human beings on a path of love and relationship recognize with each other at a certain point that love isn't a reality that they're creating with each other, but love is an all-pervasive reality that they can participate in. The same is true around power. And
mm,
also, just like people in relationship, I've learned this painfully, you might have learned this painfully, but as long as we believe that our connection to love is dependent upon the other person, it's going to be challenging, right?
mhm,
The
mhm,
same is true around power. As long as we believe our connection to power is dependent upon being in positions of formal authority, we're going to have some difficulties around power.
mhm,
So my experience is that just like love, just like intelligence, just like consciousness, just like presence, just like eros, these are all ultimately frequencies of the one reality that's living and breathing through all things. Power is the same. And that power is sacred power. That power is the sacred force of life. And that lives at the core of everything. And yeah, my sense is that the kind of leadership that is critical for us to develop today and the type of political representation as well, because this is at the heart of Singularity, is beings who are connected to that power, because that power is plugged into the purpose, to the will, to the love, to the intelligence of life itself, not my agenda as a separate being running my programs and my will and what I want
mm,
to mold my environment to be. So yeah, I feel like there's a new type of leadership which is emerging that is asking for beings to connect to that type of power, and the doorway to that power is surrender. True power
mm,
is
mhm,
access through surrender. It's access through deep dedication, purity of motive, and deep surrender, rather than being something that people hold and hoard and then exercise over others. So, all the shadows and problems and pain and emotional charge that we have around power, in my view, which, is some people want to get all the power and they want to hold it. Some people want to fight the people in power. Some people don't even want to talk about power because power is a bad word.
mhm,
Some people just don't even want to be part of the conversations, just apathy. Even I wrote a piece of Singularity the other day. There's that quote by, I think it's Lord Acton or Lord Atkin. I forget his name exactly, but he's the source of the quote. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Just
mm,
such a well-known quote. It's become such a normative perspective in our culture that power is a problem,
mm,
and that absolutely we cannot trust anyone who uh, seeks to move into positions of power and influence, because probably they have major personality defects that are, probably like a rampant narcissistic personality disorder. And the truth is, often that has been the case. And there's all sorts of really interesting conversations that we can have about why the way that we have done leadership and political representation in the past has provided actually best opportunity for people who don't have the best motives to move into those positions, and I think, that's an allied conversation, but we need to go through a radical rehaul of our relationship to leadership. And yeah, for me, this has also grown out of the passion of my being, which has been, and the deep question, the inquiry I've been in ever since the beginning of my path, which is, okay, feels clear to me that we need to have a major planetary shift happen on this planet, that we're in a time-sensitive situation around that, and that the only way this is going to work is if as many beings come online as fast as possible to find their place in that shift. So how do I contribute to that most effectively? And in that consideration, my sense has been, okay, well, there's going to necessarily need to be top-down change and bottom-up change. And bottom-up change is the swell of a process of awakening and purpose activation and service, and among more and more human beings who are finding their place and taking their place and creating the change in their lives and their communities that needs to happen. And top-down change is people in positions of real influence instituting the changes that need to happen politically, socially, economically, legally. And I think both of those are really important. And to be really honest, where I've come to with it is, I don't know if we have time for just a bottom-up process. I think actually top-down level change is so important. And what does that mean? Well, it means actually we need critical changes in the type of leaders who are holding positions of significant influence in our society and our societies. So that's why for me, a big question has been, okay, well, what is the kind of power that those beings are wielding and connecting to? And can it be the type of power which isn't my power, isn't your power? It is the power of life itself, of the sacred force of life itself. And, on a personal level, I've also had my own adventurous journey with that. I don't know if you've ever had the experience, but pretty early on, I would look at myself in the mirror in the morning sometimes and think, I love you, John, and I want so much more than you. I want so much more than this. I love this and I want so much more than this. And so a big part of my practice on the meditation cushion has been, how can I inhabit that level of dedication and surrender to make myself an opening to real power, and to give myself to the experiment and the learning of its mysteries and its lessons. One of which I learned at a particular point is, when real power is present in a field, it empowers others. If you're feeling disempowered, then take a look. Like, is there something in me? Is there a blind spot? What do I need to look at if people in my field are in some way feeling disempowered? And so there's various lessons like that. But yeah, just the fact that we're having this conversation is, to me, indicative that this is an edge for humanity. A right relationship and an evolution of our relationship to power is an edge. We're much more comfortable with love. Even that, it's just, you could say people like Jesus came into the world and brought a radical message of, hey, how about love? And we're still just inching our way there, right? So are we even ready for this conversation around power? Because in my view as well, true power operates on the given foundation of love, when we don't even have to talk about whether love is a reality here or not, when that is a given, when it's fully clear that love is our foundation, that's the space that true power can operate. Yeah, lots more I could say about it, but those are some pieces.
Yeah, there is a lot in what you just shared that we could unpack further. What I think is really interesting is that it so clearly points towards the consciousness shift that is necessary. And at the same time, that the times that we're in are bringing about exactly this need for a consciousness shift. So I feel that we're in this alchemical container that forces us to evolve, and our evolution then brings about, the process that is happening. So it's interrelated very deeply. And I can sense that this kind of power that you're speaking to isn't a personal power, as you said, it's more a transpersonal quality. And we can only open up to that if we have a transpersonal identification of who we are, if we transcend our personal needs and desires and aversions and really open ourselves to what it is that wants to move through us, and
Yeah.
in that way becoming vessels for that power rather than identifying and holding on to that power. We're making ourselves available for that power to
Yeah.
move through us. I'm reminded of Gandhi's soul force that he speaks
Yeah.
about, and
Yeah.
the quality that, yeah, I can also sense in many people, especially those who have been on a spiritual path, is, as you described, the shying away from power and rather like, no, I'll just, live a simple life and I'll just be humble. And
Yeah.
I cannot paraphrase the quote correctly right now, but there is something along the lines of that those who are so incompetent have so much confidence, and that those who are so competent have so little confidence. And I feel that this shift needs to happen for us to really tap into this power and acknowledging that it's not even our power, but we're opening ourselves to become available for this. And I appreciate how you speak into that and how you bring this topic into awareness. Very
Yeah,
much needed.
absolutely. I think I very much like the way you put it. I think that's very true. And it reminds me of something that Bruce said to me at a certain point, which was, well, look, the thing is, when spiritual people shy away from the topic of power, you know, well, what happens then? Well, actually, there's a lot of people who are much less potentially trustable. I mean, spiritual people still have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do most of the time, right? It's not like being a spiritual
Mm,
person makes you automatically trustable, but people who have love that has anchored in their hearts, when
mm,
they shy away from the conversation around power, there's a lot of people who do not have love that's anchored in their hearts, who are happy to take power in the world and
mhm,
happy to take positions of influence. And so yeah, actually, I think that speaks to one of the I appreciate the kind of kind reflections that you gave me at the beginning, where you said, I have had an impulse to take what I'm trying to connect to beyond the meditation cushion. And I think that's the application of our our opening is critical
mhm,
in the current
mhm,
times. It's the application is critical because we are, and it's happening, we are starting to build the world that our hearts and our souls deeply long for. It's happening.
mm,
Um, we're in I mean, yeah, there's a whole other piece around power there, I feel, as well, which is another angle on this. If we're honest, actually, there have been people who've been doing significant and deep spiritual work in the kind of modern West, for a good while. And there have been big bursts of that in the 60s and so on. But if we look at all of that, yes, we can see certain shifts within society that are meaningful and important. And if we ask the question, okay, but how much have the deep roots of our system really changed?
mm,
You know, and I think it's a good argument, not a lot,
mhm,
actually. And there's even an argument to be made that they've become even more entrenched, you could say.
mhm, mhm,
So why? Like, why is that the case? Even in the midst of an apparent rise in the number of people who actually are living lives more and more deeply connected to their soul and to their heart, and there's more love in the world, I think, for sure. Why?
mhm,
Why the
mhm,
kind of deep roots of our present system actually maybe are even more entrenched? And I think the truth of that is, well, those roots are actually fueled by really, really powerful energies. And those really, really powerful energies are the deep level survivalist energies that exist at the deep roots of my body and the deep roots of your body and the deep roots of our collective body, the deep energies of fear and separation and survival and I and me and mine. You
mhm,
know, and that's not to discount the really the massive significance of the freedom and the tolerance and the values of Western democracies, where we live lives, even in the midst of major issues, we live lives that are so much more free and privileged in many ways than people who live in much less free and privileged environments. And there's such profound kind of themes of separation and polarization and fear and survival based life that are so prevalent. And I think power is a really significant piece in that conversation, because I think it's going to require beings who are more and more grounded in love, who are more and more grounded in the sacred truth of our bodies, who are more and more grounded in the sacred truth of this earth and what it really is, to say yes to power, to connect to energies that are strong enough to actually offset those deep survival level energies so much today. So I think that actually the power on a certain level is one of the major levers, in my view. It's one of the major leverage points for shifting the deep level drivers of our present separation paradigm.
Yeah. And I very much agree with you that it needs both the bottom up and the top down approach in order to have a global shift in the dynamics that we're seeing today. And both are obviously very interrelated, that you live in a culture, if you live in a system that has top down been created a certain way, that will impact the consciousness of the bottom up movement. And the other way around, if you have a strong bottom up movement of strong individuals who are waking up and then moving into the top down structures and changing them, it also affects the top down structures. So that leads us into this topic that I've been shying away from. Working in the business world already has been a stretch for me, and seeing how, bringing this quality of interconnectedness, of love, of cooperation on a deep level is already difficult to grasp for many in that environment. And also one of the reasons for me, honestly, why I paused 3 years ago, and stepped away from this world and went to Costa Rica in order to recalibrate myself, because I realized how easy it is also to be enmeshed in the system and to become part of the system if you're working with the system, even just as a consultant or as a coach. And so for me, I'm just now stepping back into that world and working again with leaders and offering these perspectives. But for me, the idea of going into the world of politics is even more challenging, because at least as it's portrayed in the media, I see very few environments that are as polarized as politics and so full of deceit and, let's say, impure motives that are so easily to see through. And so, at the same time, I also acknowledge, yes, that's where we need to go, and the more I'm stepping into this quality of surrender that you're saying, like, okay, I'm also dropping my personal preferences and aversions. And if life wants me to go there, I'm ready. I will go there. And so far, I haven't heard the call. But if I would, then definitely I would align with that. But I also believe that a lot of what is happening in politics isn't portrayed in the media, which is another, very polarized field that lives from polarization. And so I'm curious, from your work over the last few years in this field, what is something that you experienced that strengthened your commitment to contribute to working in this field?
Yeah, for sure. I can immediately an answer that comes to me, and that is witnessing how what I'm in service to with Singularity already lives in the hearts of beings. How what this is that I'm seeking to be in service to and developing here, when I'm a clear enough channel for it to come through, people know this, and it's something they remember from our future. And it's also really vulnerable, because there is, in my experience, a forbidden longing for a reality around politics and leadership and power where power is clean, and where our leaders are human beings of exemplary trustworthiness, and where we have cultures of accountability that we have committed ourselves to stay as much as in integrity as we can in the sharing and the demonstration and the channeling of power healthily, so that it is an expression of the one life that we all share in service to the thriving and the needs and the health of this world. We have, when I witness people receive what this is asking to be, and I see how it already lives in them. And it's not the first time I've seen something like that. In the past, I've worked on certain projects that clearly just plugged into something that actually the collective was calling for, even though they didn't know yet that they were calling for that. And I've seen certain projects just have grow so fast in certain periods because suddenly people saw that document, or people saw that video, or people read that text, and it touch them in a place that that reality already lives in their heart and already lives in their soul as part of our shared future.
Mm.
So the hope that I take from that, is huge. And yeah, and also if I connect to that place in me, I feel that there's a place in my heart that already lives in that future where that's how we do power in this world. And I feel myself plugged into a a lineage of beings stretching back into the past and also into the future, who will come after me and who are in this same project,
Mm.
and who are working for this, and who have dedicated their lives, often at profound sacrifice and cost, for this. And this is just one stream, actually, because there's whole other lineages of beings have been doing that for the way we do value and economics in the world, or the way our relationship to technology, or our relationship to ourselves, or how we educate our children, or how we
Mhm.
take care of our health, or whatever. There's, even in the midst of all the stuff that we feel is nefarious and shadowy and that we have issues with, there's also lineages of beings extending back to the dawn of our journey here, and also forward into the future, who've been coming from such a pure place, and
Mm.
and doing their best to play a part in the evolution of our relationship to that particular domain. So I feel that within myself. Like I feel connection to the project and to the beings, or of this,
Mm.
how we evolve our relationship to power and politics. And I also, in that, as I've gone deeper in it over time, I I feel less and less polarized. I can feel the profound service and gift of the beings who were the founders of the United States. I can feel deeply connected to various projects through time that were significant contributions to the evolutionary advancement of humanity around this theme, that are still flourishing, or still in their experiment, or need an update, whatever it might be. But
Mm.
um, I can feel that, and the ways that whatever I'm dedicated to now, and however long, will look outdated. And so um, yeah, these are sources. And the way that people respond. I mean, I've had a deep journey around the way that people respond to this work around politics, because there's often a barrier that people need to go through in order to
Mm.
then be able to connect to that forbidden longing. And
Mm.
I've learned to be sensitive to that. And I think I've learned that I could have had more self-awareness when I launched this project about the barriers that I went through to really be available to this work. Because when this started to land in me, I had my own version of, really? Oh, okay. Really? Oh, I'm not quite sure if I want to go there. You know,
Mm. Mhm.
um, yeah. And so, yeah, these are some pieces that I've.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. I love the compassion that I can feel moving you when you speak from that place, and acknowledging, like Charles Eisenstein also said, this world is also not working for the 1% either, those that we project power on, or those that are dedicating their lives to be the politicians in our world today. If they allow themselves to connect to this deep longing, and I think it's such a beautiful concept to tune in with, if they and we allow ourselves to connect with these deep longings, we also come to the point where we realize, wait a minute, as it is now, we haven't really arrived yet. this is not it. There must be more.
Yeah, yeah, there must be more. And I think it's probably both true. It's all the shades of gray, black and white, and all the shades in between. There
Mm.
there will be beings who, there was a book that definitely was a turning point in reading in my life, which was Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but
Mm.
I highly recommend it, by John Perkins. It's an extraordinary book. But I mean, there's a lot that could be said about it. But basically, he's a man who essentially worked for a satellite agency of the US government intelligence services, doing all sorts of, not cool stuff, basically. And, his insider perspective on what really runs things in that whole system is what he calls the corporatocracy. And the corporatocracy for him, he's clear. He says, like, sometimes people ask me, is this some kind of malevolent conspiracy that's going on? And he says, not really. Actually, what I've observed is people who actually, they just really think this is the right thing, and
Mm.
yeah. And is that really in service of the health and the flourishing of the whole planet as a single living system? No, it's not, and is that actually in service of one united humanity being able to heal its divisions with itself and come into a new way of being? No, it's not. But people have all sorts of different values that are driving their behavior. And I think what's one way to map that, in my experience, is that, yeah, we all start out with egocentric values. We all start out with, I care about me and I want my thing, and whatever. And at a certain point we move into, this, we move into the whole ethnocentric kind of way of operating. And so much of our world is driven by incredibly powerful ethnocentric forces, whether it's political groups or nations, or it's tribes against tribes in some version of. And what's critical today is that we start to have genuinely world-centric, even earth-centric, planetary-centric beings who, at least basically, who are starting to engage the major issues of our time. And that's why I feel with Singularity, just like you said a moment ago, we're in a crisis that's forcing the emergence of structures like this. Even if Singularity ended tomorrow, I feel like there's still going to be new political movements, social movements, whatever, that are planetary in scope, because that has to be,
Mm.
because those are the questions which are most significantly on the table for us now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious how this looks on a practical level. What is the work that you're doing with Singularity?
Yeah, sure. So Singularity is a developing and diverse ecosystem that is continually revealing new areas of what it wants to be and new organs in the body and so on, which is a fascinating adventure in itself. One major area of development for my focus on it has been starting national cells. So we have about 8 or 9 different cells of Singularity in different nations, where there's small groups of passionate, purposeful, deeply aligned people who really resonate and care about this work, who are in the process of the beginnings of movement building for it. So my perception is that probably the next 2 years, 3 years, the main focus is going to need to be movement building. And that means finding more and more people who really resonate with this work. And out of those beings, I'm sure there will increasingly be those who are brave enough and crazy enough and courageous enough to actually start to get involved in the political process of, their local politics, their regional politics, their national level politics at a certain point. So
Mm.
yeah, that's a major focus, is activating, finding the people. Sometimes I describe, I'm in a big mission of finding friends, basically, of finding the people in different nations who,
Mm.
when I share about this, they know that actually they're here for this too. Maybe they're here for other stuff too, but they know that this is one of the things that they're here for,
Mm.
and to invite them into, okay, look, let's either form a national cell for your nation or invite you into the one that already exists. And then how can we stimulate that getting active? So we also have a group of Singularity members from, increasingly like a large diverse number of nations in the world, who we're building what feels like a deep and pure note community of people resonating with this work. And I offer leadership work into there for what it really means to stand for this type of representation in the world. And we also have other parts. We have the group in Singularity that's made up of the people who are point holders for these different nations, for Singularity's development and movement building in these different nations. And there's a part of Singularity that's dedicated, also the International Policy Circle, to how do we translate this foundational view that starts with the inherent unity of all life and power as a sacred principle of life, and love as the basis and driver of our relationships, whether it's international relationships or not, and a relationship to land that isn't about extraction and domination, but about its stewardship and respect for the resources and the abundance of the earth. How do we translate this and apply it to policy positions, actually formulating clear policy positions on some of the major issues of our time? So that's a whole piece that's developing too. So my work with this, increasingly with other people who are in the kitchen with me around this, is coordinating this stuff and listening. I find it's really important. This is an important principle of leadership that I've definitely learned in this, Jonathan, which is to be clear, I don't know what I'm doing. So it's been super clear in the beginning. I don't know what I'm doing. No, I've never done anything like this before. And there's ways I do feel there's clear guidance that I'm connected to, and I have leadership experience, and I'm definitely, my life is a leadership-based practice of listening and sensing and attuning to what wants to come next, and doing that as best collaboratively as I can, was also staying true and aligned to the signal that wants to come through. So, I have that foundation and never done it like this before. Listening. Sometimes some stuff we try and do sometimes just completely doesn't work. It's just like, actually, and maybe that comes later and it's just a block right now. I've had to really work with some of my own, what parts of me are actually still existing within the present paradigm, and struggle to be able to really be receptive to something so radically different, that this be. So managing all of that stuff in company with others who are holding roles too is what it looks like day to day.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's funny, I wrote down a question earlier in preparation for this interview on what is the role of remembering in your work, and you already spoke into that, that the people that you speak to, they somehow remember from the future. And in that sense, I perceive you also as being guided and being attuned to the practice of pre-sensing, and attuning to the emerging future. So there is a part of you that also knows exactly what you're doing, and I can feel that through the embodiment of how you're doing it. And so I feel that is already a huge shift in the attitude in which you do your work compared to the field of politics as I see it operating today, of really having the humility and at the same time accessing that power of knowing. Also, there is a deep knowing of what needs to happen.
Yeah. I think that's a very powerful and subtle consideration to be in. I was actually thinking about it earlier today. I wrote a piece on, it was the first piece I've written on the beginnings of what Singularity's economic position is going to be, and position around the emergence of a radically different kind of economic system. And I felt myself, something in me felt like in that I had started to touch into what we know must come, and I could feel the definite note of that. And I was just spending time with, that's really attuning to that, really attuning to when I'm in alignment, when we're in alignment with that, with the pieces coming through, that where there's that kind of resonance, there's that kind of remembering, that we collectively can feel, that's actually something that we know must be, and as far as leadership is concerned, I've read a bunch of stuff or heard a bunch of stuff from leaders in the past around so much of leadership is essentially inspiring slash convincing other people to do what you want them to do, right?
Mm, hmm
And a lot of leaders talk about that. How do you, particularly leaders in kind of conventional business environments, how do you motivate people to do what you want them to do? And
hmm
actually, I think, well, what better way to inspire creativity and collaboration than actually we're bringing something through together that all of us so deeply can feel in our hearts is the future that must be in a way that's most aligned with purpose and love and sacred earth for us and for our
hmm
community and for our children and for our children's children. Like that's a good motivator, so
hmm hmm Beautiful. I'm curious how this lands with people that you are interacting with who are currently in the political system. Are there any references or moments that come to mind where you feel like, oh yeah, that was a memorable moment of talking to someone who's actually
yeah.
still rooted in that world?
Yeah. I mean, I've had various responses. I've had responses which have been hugely positive, um, and congratulatory and beautiful,
Mm,
actually. Um,
mm,
I've also had responses that have been, yeah, where it felt like that person can't really hear this,
mhm,
and
mm,
that's okay. There's one response that I remember in particular, which was where I was grateful to receive some feedback and some reflections from a woman who had been part of the co-founding of one of the pan-European political parties. So Singularity is the beginnings of a transnational, so that's a pan-global political party.
mm,
And there are already a few pan-European political parties that are starting to develop to try and um, align themselves with the most healthy, interconnected, unified Europe, within the present global challenges and so on. And she's a woman who had been part of the co-founding of one of those parties, and she said this thing to me, which was it was very, very sobering, where she said, John, she was talking about having volunteers work within Singularity. And she said, John, that will be good, but it's good for you to know that the way that often works in political parties is initially people are very up for getting involved and they're stirred by the idealism and so on, but often they don't stick around long. And
mm,
I said, well, okay, well, tell me more about that. And she said, well, sometimes they don't stick around because they realize that actually this is going to be a much longer work than just the rise of an enthusiastic movement and suddenly we're elected and everything goes the way we want it to go. But also sometimes they don't stick around long because they quickly realize how toxic the political space is.
mhm,
And she said, she basically said that she had experienced stuff that was so toxic in the political space that she quickly had felt like I'm just out. I don't want to be connected to that in any way. And I was
mm,
I was curious. I was like, can you tell me about that? Tell me, what are you talking about? And she said, this is what stayed with me. It was chilling, actually. She said, John, um, and she was speaking about Germany. So she was speaking about the major parties in Germany. And she said, the moment those parties actually start to be aware that you're gaining any kind of influence, they have lawyers who are working 24/7. They have people who will go and search through your social media profile from the beginning that you initiated it. They will have
mm,
people who go and speak to your previous lovers and girlfriends and the people you went to school with, anything to discredit you. You know,
mm,
that's the kind of dirt digging that
mhm,
is a normal part of the mud slinging match of regular politics. And just feeling that energy was just like,
mm,
ugh, you know.
mhm.
And it feels vulnerable for me as well because I was a heroin addict on the street for 5 years. Like I'm not the model. Like, I'm, I'm not the
At least not to old standards.
not to old standards, right?
Mm.
And
For the
and
new, it
I
might be the honorary badge that is required in order to
yeah
step up.
yeah It could be. But I actually remembered in that. I remembered, I don't know if you've seen the movie 8 Mile with Eminem. And if
No, I haven't actually.
you should check it out. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a rap battle that he has at the end of the movie, and he's the underdog, and he's had a hard time, and he's had a hard life, and things have not gone the way he wanted, and he's in this final of this rap battle, and it's his turn, and he knows that the guy he's rapping with is gonna just take him apart. And instead of just, what he does is he does his rap, and in his rap, he just names right now, right now, right now. He names everything that
Mm,
the others could throw at him. He's just like, yeah,
mm-hmm.
this is me. Yeah, this is me. Yeah, this is me. And on
Wow.
that foundation, this is what I'm going to share with you.
Mm,
So I've just been in that interesting inquiry around like when maybe it's going to be my 8 Mile moment of
mm-hmm.
actually like, okay, I'm gonna
Mm,
on a
mm-hmm.
list the shit that I did that actually, I know that was really out of alignment with my heart, and I know I didn't treat that person well, and I know that I felt guilt about how I showed up in that situation when I was coming and living from a place that actually was really super out of alignment and desperate and in pain and traumatized, and I think, yeah, so there's a paradigm around leadership which is
Mm,
needs to change there, and I think we've gone
mm,
through a process to do with spiritual gurus where thankfully increasingly we've started to exit the paradigm of projecting perfection on human beings and then getting really upset when they don't demonstrate that perfection.
mm,
And I think there's a necessity. It's not quite at the same level of development in the leadership domain, I think, because we still do have a bit of a tendency to hope that our leaders are perfect, and hope that they are, going to be the answer in various ways. Um, and I think, yeah, that's why vulnerability based leadership is such a powerful thing today. It's why,
mm,
leaders who are willing to begin the conversation with a recognition of their struggles and a recognition of their vulnerabilities and a
mm,
recognition of their, the traumas that they've experienced in their life, and who are
mm.
still here and
Yeah.
who are still connected and who are still feeling like, and I'm in service to something that, maybe we can share in, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious about what you're in service to too. That can be such a powerful shift in relationship to leadership.
And it very much speaks into what you shared earlier, that these leaders are creating more leaders and not followers. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
And
it's so spot on, to have that vulnerability, to not strive for others to put you on that pedestal, to not have all these projections, but to give them back and to say like, hey, I am like you, and if I can do it, then you can do it too.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the way I think about that as well is like, I mean, as long as we have, I mean, I feel with Singularity, if this was taken forward in a way that was about me and about whether I am the type of human being that someone wants me to be or not, or that's collectively viewed as an okay human being or whatever, that's never going to have the type of traction that I want this thing to have. And
Mm,
I recognize it
hmm.
needs to have. This needs to be a collectively shared process. This needs to
Yeah.
be shared leadership among a
Hmm.
group of people of all nations and backgrounds and races and cultures who together recognize that this belongs to all of us and is asking to
Hmm.
all of us. And if that is the direction it can go in, it doesn't matter actually, what disagreements or issues someone might have with me or some other individual node of
Mm,
this being that's coming into manifestation, because it's not about any of us individually. And
right.
so that's where my project of making friends comes in.
Hmm. Yeah, I
I'm
love
trying
that.
to find out who are the people who are actually
Hmm.
also pillars in this temple, who are the pillars
Yeah.
in this
Mm,
new kind of temple of power and sacred power and politics
hmm.
wants to be.
Yeah, I just put that on my website as well. I'm not looking for clients, I'm looking for allies, and
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
finding these leaders of leaders that are
Mhm.
really stepping up to be an example, not of the perfect shiny new object, that everyone is focusing their attention on, but rather redirecting the attention backwards of like, hey, what is
Mhm.
your leadership capacity that you can contribute with, that you feel called to step up with?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Absolutely. I learned that lesson when I was in the journey of doing the work I mentioned before, working with these organizations for 7 years, you know, trying to explore social transformation on the basis of spiritual awakening, where sometimes we'd run events, and at the end of the events, people would come to us and be like, "Wow, that was a great event. What should we do?"
Mm.
You know, and I
Mhm.
remember just, oh, this actually, wait, no, this isn't the paradigm. You know,
Mm.
if where
Mhm.
we've got to is a place where people are saying, okay, now tell us what to do. You know,
Mhm.
it's like, wait, no, that's not it. You know,
Mm. Mhm.
I totally am open to all of us needing help sometimes. We all need help, and it's really good for us to have reflections and support for coming to greater clarity, and a scalable process, a genuinely scalable process that isn't being scaled by me or anyone, but is an organic, self-organizing, unfolding, and emergence, is one that actually you have more and more beings who can feel and instinctually sense what's theirs to do, and
Mhm.
can find their place by virtue of finding that sweet spot, which is their passion, what turns them on most, and their greatest gift to give. You know, and when we start to have communities and wider collective fields of beings who are finding that place on whatever scale it is, whether it's for me with my family, or whether it's for me with my community, or whether it's for me on some broader scale, my view, that's the key to when we start to have a kind of self-organized transformational process that doesn't belong to any of us individually.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I very much resonate with that principle and with that vision. And I'm curious if you want to share a little bit more about your vision for humanity, the role of singularity, and how that unfolds for you if you allow yourself to picture the ideal scenario, to dream
Mm,
big.
mm. It's a beautiful question. Allows me to zoom out. You know, I realize I'm a lot of the time in the workings of the advancement of my work in various ways.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it takes me to what I'm doing this all for. My inner experience is that the truth of things is that we are part of something so wildly, extraordinarily soul and heart shatteringly sacred that we have not even begun to collectively fathom.
mm,
And it is drop to your knees, you know, cry your heart out at just experiencing a drop of what really this all is. You know, I want that as how we live. I I have always really deeply cared that the deep truths that are revealed in the process of authentic spiritual awakening don't just stay the focus of beings who are in caves or mountaintops or monasteries, but actually become the focus of what we build together. I want it embodied. I want it
mm,
manifested. I want economic systems and political systems and ways that we do family and ways that we share love with each other and ways that we celebrate with each other and dance with each other to be reminders of the sacred nature of what we're a part of,
mm,
and for that to be the foundation of what we build together, rather than just the very privileged experience of a few who, you know, who are going to the edges of transformational possibility. So yeah.
mm. Beautiful. Mm. Yeah, I'm allowing the image of that vision to sink in.
How
Mm.
about you? I'm curious what your answer to that is.
Mm. I had the last interview with my friend Rainer, and we came up with a similar question. And he thought about it for a moment, and then he came up with the answer that it would actually be exactly as it is now.
Mm, mm,
And there's something that very deeply resonates in that for me. And yet I believe that through that realization that exactly as it is now is how we want it, there would be some shift happening as well that would change everything
mm,
by it not changing. Nisargadatta also said, yet and already, always and already the other world is this world rightly seen?
Mm,
And I
mm,
think my answer is probably a combination of both, of recognizing like, oh yeah, this human embodied experience of really being also a limited entity that is separate and at the same time infinite, you know,
mhm,
and
mm,
at the same time feeling the sacredness and feeling the mundane and feeling it all together and recognizing, having that awareness of, wow, how would I play in this limited form if I knew that I was an infinite being?
mm,
And really finding the courage, finding the trust to allow myself to surrender to that which is moving me, which
mm,
very much relates to the power that you're speaking of as a moment to moment experience of really allowing this eros life force to inform me. And I can sense how there's a catalytic fire that will spread across the globe and dissolve all the conditionings that keep us trapped in our patterns, that keep us limited in our fears of how we should be and how we should respond, not just in the larger scheme of our life and where we live, what we do for work, but no, as a moment to moment experience of how do I relate to you right now as I'm speaking here? What am I holding still back because of my conditioning, because of my fear? And what would it look like if I allow all of that to come through, if I allow every moment to be a full expression of my love? And hmm, yeah,
mm,
I cannot quite picture what the implications of that would be globally, but I could feel that it would be, as you say, earth-shattering, soul-shattering, heart-shattering, and really changing everything. And at the same time, bringing us back to the simplicity of like, oh, this is how it always was.
mm. Amen. Yeah, yeah. That's what's always been here, waiting for us.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm touched by that. Thank you.
Mm. And yet there's still also a part that is curious about the practical next and maybe the step after the next step for singularity. How do you see singularity unfolding and contributing to that world?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I feel that it can have at the least, I want singularity to influence the systems of power and politics and governance that come, at the least. And I feel confident it can.
Mm.
There's something alive in this. And it's a practice and a continual practice to steward that and to stay aligned with it and to stay listening to it and to try and allow the growth and the expansion of what singularity is to stay true to that note. But it's there. More than that would be for singularity to actually start to move into positions of influence, for singularity representatives to start to move into positions of influence. So I remain agnostic currently on whether the present political system as it exists within Western democracies is going to stay how it is. For instance, whether we're going to continue, let's say 25 years from now, whether we're still going to have the kind of election-based representative systems that we presently have. I could imagine that's the case, and instead of what we have now, we radically update our relationship to leadership and representation and civic participation. If that is how things go, then yeah, I imagine, let's say in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, we start to have singularity representatives who are showing up in the not just the local or the regional politics of their nation, but
Mm.
playing a role in the national politics of their nation. And instead of representing the tribal, political, social, or economic policies of a particular party, they're representing the health and the needs and the flourishing of the earth as a single living system and the inherent unity of all life as it wants to uniquely express in the needs of their nation,
Mm.
politically, socially, and economically. I would feel really good about that. If I
Mm.
started to see, even if I wasn't connected to singularity and I started to see some alternative political parties showing up in Germany, here where I live, and their mandate was, well, this is what we're in service to. And it's kind of what I just named. I would jump to vote for them. So I feel like that's one piece. And if there are breakthrough developments that have us start to navigate power in radically new ways, one movement which I'm staying connected to is like the Web3 space, and also DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And I know there's a lot of people in the DAO space who feel really clearly that what Web3 and DAOs represent is the next step as far as how human beings are going to do power and decision making and on various scales. And I think that's also plausible. I think, absolutely, I have space for the possibility that there are going to be much more efficient, much less polarization driven ways that we can make choices that don't predicate two groups of human beings fighting with each other in a kind of school classroom. Wow, wouldn't it be great? So, yeah. And if that's the case, then yeah, I'm exploring ways that Singularity can be part of and contribute to that movement as well. So the basic answer is, I feel, let's say 3 years from now, that we start to really have Singularity representatives participating in a number of different nations in the political process of how decision making is implemented in service of communities, in service of the earth, in service of our society and cultures. Yeah, and the mission that I list for Singularity on the website is that Singularity is working towards global governance sourced in the inherent unity of all life by 2050. So, yeah, by 2050, to me, maybe I might seem crazily idealistic, but I think it's quite possible that we could have some kind of system of global governance that is sourced in the inherent unity of all life and is implementing that as the basis of operations through a global network of representatives who are deeply connected to and who are also sharing power through their communities, through their diverse communities. So, yeah, I think I do feel that's possible, and that's the mission for Singularity to contribute to that process.
Yeah. And I can see how stepping into that political arena and being involved with that would be already such a disruptive force. Imagining you having your 8 Mile moment in front of the German government, and really not just bringing in a different voice, but embodying a different way of doing politics and inspiring and inviting that into the whole system and changing the system of how politics is done instead of the mud fight that we often see going on, really shifting it into how can we actually align our intentions that are on so many levels shared, and really stepping up for what is bigger than our personal differences that we're putting in front, but really looking into what are the common visions, dreams, values that we actually all hold.
Absolutely. And what I would also say with that is something that's inspired me to think about in the development of this work is think how many human beings there are on the planet who are in some process of soul awakening. It's vast, Jonathan. It's vast. That is such a vast number of people. And how many of those people do we imagine feel like they have political representation that actually is really aligned with their values? A really small number, really small number, which is why there's so much apathy and disconnection around politics, which is why people so instinctually and so often, the moment that the political conversation is brought up, are like, because actually there's so few options on the menu for people who feel like they're in some process of soul awakening. And I find that an inspiring thing. Imagine if that group of people could start to feel, oh no, wait, there is something that represents me, and actually I want to align with this. I want to I want to get involved with this movement of a radically different type of politics. And that started to actually gain the kind of traction that level of membership and representation would entail. I think that could absolutely be a disruptor to what presently is. And I also think, even though the group of people on the planet who are in some process of soul awakening represents a pretty privileged demographic, I also think that actually that's going to become the demographic on the planet.
Mm.
Sound
Mm-hmm.
like a crazy thing to say, but my personal perception is that we are in the beginning of, I mean, we're maybe a little bit beyond the beginning now, but a time of global crisis that is going to bring humanity to its knees. And just like I was sharing at the beginning, where I was saying, I've been stubborn and I've needed pain at times in order to basically surrender and make myself available for some deeper intelligence and wisdom that wants to move through the next phase of my life. I feel that's the case for humanity now. And what
Mm-hmm.
that means is that more and more and more and more human beings are going to be coming to that place of surrender, and that place is the portal, is the doorway to a process of soul awakening. So my sense is that, yeah, beyond black, white, whatever other color or this demographic or that, male, female, whatever, the demographic, the coming demographic is going to be human beings in a process of soul awakening. And so, yeah, my sense is if that demographic of people is going to increase, we're already seeing this, that demographic of people increasingly does not feel that there is an option for them politically that really is representative of their values. So yeah, anyone who's listening to this or who's watching this, I really invite you to consider that this could be an option for you, that actually there could be something for us, that there
Mm-hmm.
could be a growing tribe of human beings of different cultures and races and nations who feel the one humanity and the one earth and the one life in them, and who are creating something politically that can be an influential force in humanity building something new.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful. And aside holding that intention and that vision, what is something that people who are feel spoken to directly right now that they can do to
Yeah, for sure.
support, to get involved, to also
Mm.
amplify the work that you're doing?
Awesome. Thank you. They can become members of Singularity. I'll make sure that you have all the links when this is sent out. So they can become members of Singularity. Um, they can donate to Singularity. Financial support is a hugely helpful thing for us to be able to expand and develop the work where the people who are so passionate about this really can dedicate their time more and more to it so it can grow in the way that feels most aligned. They can let me know if they feel passionate enough that they are interested in us forming a national cell in their nation. If there's one that doesn't already exist, get in
Mm.
touch. I'm up for us supporting you to start that. If that's the case, you can join and become a contributing part of a national cell that already does exist as well. Yeah, those are ways that people can get involved with Singularity. And if you're
Mm.
passionate about this and you really care about it and you have some other stream of inspiration that feels strong for you that I haven't mentioned, get in touch with me, find me on social media, write me or something like this. I'm
Hmm.
open. Yeah.
Beautiful. We'll make sure to put all these links in the show notes so that people can easily find it. Mm.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah.
I feel that there were so many side alleys that we could have gone into that would have opened up entire universes, and maybe we will at some point. But I
Mhm.
also sense that it has been so rich and so full that we can bring it to a completion here. Before we do, I'm curious, what is something else that is on your mind, on your heart these days that you would like to share?
Something else on my mind and my heart these days. Yeah, I mean, which comes to me immediately. I have a 4-year-old son. I'm just really passionate about the way that we raise our children,
Hmm.
and that I'm really in a contemplation at the moment of the ways that, yeah, I want to raise my son and that we now can raise our children, which free them or help them avoid or not need to go through some of the processes of soul loss in a certain way, or various traumas and conditionings that
Hmm.
my generation experienced, or the generations before me experienced much more intensely as well. So, that's just present for me. I actually, today I read a Buckminster Fuller quote where he was saying how our children are, from one angle, the elders of our future. That actually they've come in ready for a world that we don't know yet, and we only see that world through their eyes. So it's present for me now, as I
love
I'm
that.
going to spend time with my son this evening, and I'm going to look into his eyes and see if I can feel something of the world that he's here for, that I can only see as I tune into him.
Oh, it's amazing. Beautiful. Thank you so much, John. I feel really deeply touched by the work that you're doing, by the connection that I feel between us. I was talking to so many people over the last few days where I can sense there are all these beautiful fires across the globe that are shining and burning so much more brightly, but now I can also feel these fires connecting and building these links between each other, and it's really spreading across the globe in a beautiful, very natural, and at the same time also a breathtaking way. So thank you for being part of this global fire that is burning in our hearts, and for dedicating your life to this work.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate
thank you for what you do as well. Thank you for the stand that you are, and I feel your bravery and your courage and your vulnerability and your stand for the type of leadership that I know we're both really passionate about, and the relationship to power that we're both deeply caring about. And and I really appreciate your courage to speak for and stand for the topics that you are. And may your podcast, may your work, may your projects, may they flourish.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to the Soul Awakened Leadership Podcast. You will find all the links and information on today's guest in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who might benefit from the insights. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment or review on Spotify or any of the platforms. If you would like to find out more about my work or connect, you can visit jonathanklod.com. That is JONATHANKLODT.com, or find me at Jonathan Klod on Instagram or Facebook.